I often say that I've been doing pen tests since 2008 and professionally, and I've never once been paid for a pen test. I get paid for the report. And it seems like a small distinction, but it's a shift in how you think about things that really pays off in the long run, I think. I've been doing this for a while now. I've been pen testing since 2008, been BHIS for about 8 years now anyway. So I like it and it's fun. And it can be overwhelming. And a strategy I've found that helps is to kind of go to first principles for things. Instead of memorizing a list of 58 different things you have to do while you're reporting or while you're running Nmap or whatever it is you're doing, if you think about the first principles and get those solid, then you can figure out the rest as you go. You don't have to memorize 50 rules if they can all be derived from one rule. And Alvin Toffler agrees with me on this. Well, you think about the big things while you're doing the small things, so the small things all go in the right direction. This is ever like got interested in something and get distracted and spend way too much time on something that doesn't actually need all that attention? I'm sure you have. We've all done that. So this is what we're doing today. We're going to think about the big things here so that the next time you have to sit down and write a report, some of the stuff will come a little bit more naturally to you, maybe. The report, as Ian was saying before, is the thing. The test itself is just a series of events over time. The test itself has no substance to it, but the report is what you're paid for. It's what lives on forever. The point of the report is to communicate the important parts of the test, to document what you did while you were testing. The vulnerabilities, obviously, but you also want to include the good things. If their customer is doing something well, you want to acknowledge that so they don't get distracted with the problems and stop doing the good things. So a report is not just a list of vulnerabilities. The report is also one of many inputs people will have. It's easy to think that the world that you see is the only world that there is, and that your ideas about what should happen in this environment are facts and not just opinions and not just part of what should be taken into account when people decide what to do about the information. So keep that in mind too. That's a first principle. Keep in mind that you will never know the whole story of the environment. There will be lots of things going on there that are just not available to you to know. If you've ever been in a corporation and you've had consultants come in, maybe there's been a problem, your pet problem you've been arguing about for years, and there just never seems to be time or budget or priorities to fix that thing. And then the managers hire some consulting firm to come in and do all this analysis and all this Six Sigma stuff and do a little SIPOC and a SWOT analysis and all these things. And they come up at the end of this big, long, expensive engagement with the same thing you've been saying for years. And now the management says, oh my goodness, we need to take care of this. I can't believe we stop everything and let's fix it. And you're like, I've been saying this forever. This is your chance to be an advocate for those people. Help them out. If you're hired as a consultant, be that person. Ask them, hey, what are the problems you've been having that you're just not getting enough attention for? Maybe you can highlight those in your report if you see the same evidence. So the report is your chance to guide the improvements in the environment, not to dictate the improvements, to guide them. So you got to stay a little bit humble. That's another one of those principles. A little bit of humility goes a long way. The report ends up being the story of the environment as you, the security expert, saw it. Now, as soon as I say expert, some of you are saying, well, I'm not an expert. I'd like to ask you, think a second. Think about somebody you think of who is an expert in whatever field. Think about that person. Does that person know everything there is to know about the field? Does that person never make mistakes? Does that person always have the answer right off the top of their head? They do not, right? Nobody is like that. But somehow when people see the word expert apply to themselves, they start thinking, oh, but there's stuff I don't know. I'm not the expert. It's not what expert means. You are the expert if you are doing the pen test. If you are representing the security interests on a project, you are the security expert. You don't have to know everything. That's not what it means. It's okay. So it's the story of the environment as you see it as that security expert, from that security point of view, maybe, if you want to say it that way. It's also a tool for guiding action. It's not just a list. It's not just, I found all these vulnerabilities. It should help reinforce, how do we address those? Why do these things matter? What should we do about them? Not just a list of problems. It's also, and this one's easy to overlook, but this is the most fun part about writing reports. It's a resource where interested readers can learn things. So not everybody's going to be interested, but some people are. Some people who are working in the development team, some people who are working in the operations team or the system administrators, they think that security stuff is kind of cool, right? And they want to learn how that stuff works and how do these exploits work? How do people move around in this environment that I, as the administrator, I thought I had it pretty secure, but you found ways around things. I want to learn how that works. If you report clearly as you're going and show them the steps that you took, they can learn from you and they'll be better at their jobs. And also they'll be less likely to call you later, right? If they can follow in your footsteps and do the things that you did, then when they make their fix, they can take that same path and see if it worked or not. And then they won't call you again, which is a bigger deal, I think, in corporate environments. If you're in the security organization for your larger organization, you're more likely to get people coming back to your desk 6 months after the test to ask you to explain something than in a consulting situation where I am at BHIS. But still, you don't want to just not be annoyed with questions down the road. You don't want them to have to ask the questions down the road. The documentation can help them be more self-sufficient. And the last thing, it's evidence of the state of the target at a point in time. So evidence is what makes this not just my opinion. Evidence is facts. Evidence is how we can agree on what we saw. It also shows your skill as a tester, but don't like try to do that. That shouldn't be your goal. The report is not a good place to show off. Let your actions speak for themselves. The fact that you were able to find this vulnerability and exploit it says enough. Let the facts speak for themselves. Don't puff yourself up too much. It can be off-putting. Sometimes there's conflict. Every once in a while, there's conflict between the security organization and other organizations. And the more you puff yourself up and the more you say, look how awesome this was, the more you make it difficult to have conversations to make things move forward. So let that be a side effect, not a property of your report. So what is a good report? I think a good report is good. It has some good stuff in it. It has a source of facts, like we were talking about, with evidence to back those things up. It's a source of your expert analysis to put those facts in context. So not just here was a problem, but here's why it matters, or here's maybe where it came about, or here's maybe how it might be exploited and what might come from that exploit down the road. Take advantage of that opportunity for people to learn from your experience and from your time in the environment. The technical folks, for all the technical stuff, these people are probably closer to your heart than the business folks. They're the people who use computers because they're fun, like you. The business folks use computers because they get things done with the computers, not because it's fun to play with the computer. So if you keep that in mind, that's the difference between these two audiences, and you're talking to both of them in your report. And everybody who reads it should get some information about why the things you found are worth talking about. It's going to be one of many references for making decisions in the organization. And another good thing that sometimes we lose track of is you want to have the appearance of professionalism. And I say that as appearance and not just professionalism, because the appearance doesn't necessarily reflect reality, right? You can have something that looks polished and awesome, and it might be horrible. But the other side doesn't work either. If you have a sloppy looking report, even if it's fantastic and great content, if it's sloppy and disjointed and you're using 12 different fonts on one page and you've got different colors all over the place that aren't harmonious or anything, it looks sloppy, even if your work was fantastic. So it's worth spending a little bit of time to come up with a template. I say don't use crayons. Use something that's clean, something that's clear, something that you could maybe hire someone to help you with. Find a graphic designer who might work in Microsoft Word for you or whatever it is you're using to do your reports with, and let them help you make a beautiful presentation. And then you fill in the details, and then you don't have to worry about it again. So I know this is a little out of our normal wheelhouse for technical folks. The design and appearance and all that kind of stuff isn't where our heads usually are. So hire someone to do it for you, and then you can just use it over and over again. Get a good template, and you can stop thinking about it. Facts are good. Lots of good things should be in a report. So the facts, evidence to back them up. And this is another one where thinking about it just a little bit differently goes a long, long way. So rather than making your facts and your evidence easy to understand, rather than having a screenshot that shows the issue and makes sense, make it a little bit harder on yourself. Make it hard to misunderstand. So the difference is that, yes, something easy to understand does tell you what you want it to say, but something that's hard to misunderstand doesn't have another interpretation. It doesn't show you anything else that's not relevant to the thing you're trying to illustrate. So not clear and easy to follow, but hard to misunderstand is is a more useful, deeper way of thinking about it that helps you answer questions at the detail level. How should I make this screenshot? How should I describe this situation? You'll come out with a better solution if you're thinking about that. How could somebody misunderstand what I'm saying and then fix it? So I'm talking about facts because facts is not the only thing that's in the report. Facts establish relevant aspects of reality. That's my definition of a fact. So relevant means it has something to do with security, what you're doing in this report. And it's the reality. It's what's actually true in the environment. It's something that has been, something that's true, something you verified, something you have some evidence to say this is a true thing in the environment at the time I was testing it. And the best way, in my opinion, to present facts is with screenshots. Not everyone agrees, and that's okay. We're going to show you some examples of people who disagree with me on that one. But screenshots, I think, is the easiest way to be unconfusing, to be hard to misinterpret. So how do you make a good screenshot? Think about it first. Compose the scene first. Think about you're in an art class, or maybe you're taking a photograph or something. Think about what's going to be in the image. So this means arranging your windows so that they're showing what needs to be shown and not showing other things. It means if you're testing a web application, maybe you change the size of the browser window so that it doesn't take up a lot of horizontal space. It just focuses in on the area that you're interested in. Burp Suite is my favorite example for this one because there's so many ways in Burp Suite that you can arrange the windows. You can have the request or just the response. You can have them side by side. You can have them top and bottom. And for different circumstances, different layouts make more sense. So take a couple minutes to think about that. Not even a couple minutes. Take a few seconds to think about how to arrange things to make whatever it is you think is important, make it obvious and clear. So include what you want to show and do your best to not include anything else. You'll never get there, but focus on what's important. You want to add boxes and arrows to direct your attention. And I say that's kind of a fundamental rule. Sometimes you can skip that, but if you're skipping that, that should be the exception. If you look at a screenshot and you don't have any boxes and arrows, ask yourself, do I need them? Is it plainly obvious to anybody off the street who looks at this why this screenshot is here? And the answer to that is usually no. There's usually something you want to point out, something you want to highlight. Just make a conscious choice about it, is all I'm asking you to do. You'll make the right decision. Just have the thought. And then if there's text in the screenshot that you want people to read because it's relevant to the issue at hand, make sure that text is about the same size as the text around it in the rest of the report. So the words that you're typing should be about the same size as the words in the screenshot that goes next to your typing. I have a few screenshots that I'm going to show you for this and a couple of things coming up. And there's a link here to Julio Cesafort's GitHub repo. Somehow, Julio has collected an enormous collection of pen test reports, public pen testing reports, he calls it. I'm taking him at his word that they're public. And that's what I'm showing you because it's so hard to clearly redact a report, to take a real report and redact all of the customer specific information so you can't figure out who it is. That's hard enough to begin with. And then to have it also still show the issue, pretty hard. So Julio has done a fantastic service for me and for all of us by putting all this stuff together. So take a look at his repository. Go clone that repo, pull it all down. It's a few hundred megabytes. It's large. And look at the reports. I'm not going to call out specific like this report's good, this report's bad, because I think you can make those decisions yourself. Open some reports and look at them and see if you can find what's good about how this is presented, what's bad about how this is presented. And then what you do is the things that are good, you steal those and you use those same techniques in your own reports. And the things that are bad, you put a little note and you say, oh, if I ever do that, I hope I catch myself, because you will do it. You will, the things you think are horrible, I promise you, you will do them sometimes in your own reports. I do them sometimes in my own reports. I end up with screenshots that are horrible that you can't read just because I'm not paying attention to the reporting. I'm too focused on the test itself, which is not a horrible thing, right? That's the job. It's how it goes. Be kind to yourself. You'll figure it out and you'll make good decisions. So here is a screenshot that is hard to misinterpret. This is from the Red Siege sample report that's in there. And this is from a fake test that they Red Siege shared just to get their template out there. And it's a really good template. So this is a screenshot of some text, and they're telling you that the strict transport security header is not present. So if they didn't have that label there and that box around it, how do you know what you're looking at? I see some HTTP response headers. Okay, why do I care? Well, we're telling you that something that we want to see here is not here. So especially in that case, you have to call that out. You can't just put up a screenshot and say, hey, I hope they'll notice what's missing, right? Call it out. The one little nitpick I would have about this is that you can't see below this. So the last header you see here is set cookie. This screenshot doesn't prove there aren't more headers after that. I think it's safe to assume that the tester who did this looked and made sure that that header was not there before that they put this in the report. But it would just be just that tiny extra little bit of reliability if they had one more blank line there just to show that they had them all. Here's a screenshot. Too small, can't read. This is very common, especially with web apps. This is from the DC voting report in Julio's repository. And if you look, I put some things together here. So the text at the bottom here, musical calling card, is here. And the text they want you to read in the screenshot, I put it next to it. 7 lines of the screenshot text take up the same space as 4 lines of the body text. That's too much of a difference. You can't read this. So what would you do to fix that? Maybe you don't need all of that. Maybe there's only a few lines in here. It says our additions appear on line 68 to 70. So if it's only on 3 lines, why do we need all these other lines? Maybe just thinking about it a little bit more before you put it in there would solve that problem for you. Also, there's nothing in here that tells you which lines to look at. And there's text that says line 68 to 70, but the line numbers are tiny. A box would solve most of this problem. And sometimes the screenshots can be too big. Here's one where this text is way bigger than it needs to be. It's disorientingly big. It's going to take up a lot of space. If you saw this in context on the whole page, which I can't show you cleanly on slides like this, it would look exactly like this, but it would be on a page. You can tell it's too big. This is not the thing that is the primary focus of the whole page. Just shrink it down. Just grab the little dot here that shows up in the bottom left and just drag it up a little bit until it's a little smaller. Not hard to fix. You just got to think about it. So those are for screenshots of graphical things. Sometimes we do testing and we do, we're looking at text. We're looking at terminal output. We're looking maybe at the content of a text file or a configuration file. Not everything is an image. So the rules for documenting that, these are my rules. You don't have to follow them. I'm just making suggestions here. Compose the scene first. Exactly. Same thing as if it was a graphical thing. Arrange your windows, arrange the text in the window so that you're getting exactly what you want. If it's something on the command line, run the command and get your output. And if there are extra lines in the output, maybe there's something, if there's something simple and clear you can do to limit that, that might be helpful. Maybe now you can have 4 lines instead of 12 lines, and you don't have to put a box around the 4 that are important in those 12. Still keep it clear how you're getting that information. You can go too far. You can go way too far very quickly by adding like a big long pipeline of piping the output of this command to that command and pulling things out and grepping and using awk and sed and all those types of things to get it to say what you want. Sometimes that's the wrong way to go. Sometimes you end up with less distracting information, but now the source becomes unclear. You're showing something you've edited rather than something that just came out. And you can add color or bold or highlighting to the text when you put it in your report. So you can put it in as text, not as an image screenshot, but as text itself. And so if you're doing it as text, you're not going to draw on it. How do you draw attention to things? Highlight, colors, bold. I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. And you always want to use a different font than the report's body text so that it stands out. If you ever read a technical book, the front few pages of any No Starch book or any O'Reilly Press book, they all tell you what the text conventions are that they use to indicate what. We use this font and this color and this indentation for commands that you're supposed to type at the terminal. We use this thing to indicate a warning. We're just following along with that. It's a standard that lots of technical publications follow. So why don't we play along, do it the way everybody else does? So people don't have to read that for our report. How do they do it? Do it kind of like people expect. So here's one. This is using colors, and I say making the best of it. So these rules, these firewall rules, are longer than 1 line. The first thing you might do is you might say, oh, if I used a smaller font, maybe it would fit on 1 line because that wrapping makes it harder to read. And then maybe you do that, and then you realize that, oh, now it's too small to read. It's all fits on 1 line, so it's easier in that sense, but the individual characters can't make them out. So they made a good choice in this one. This is from Bishop Fox. They made a good choice here. They let it wrap, and we're going to accept that diminishment of clarity because we get the benefit of now you can read it. And they've highlighted in red and bold the last two lines. It looks like four, but it's the last two lines that they want you to pay attention to. This is a really good example. This may not be all of the rules that exist on this system, but the two that they care about, the two they want you to focus on, are right in here. And it's obvious by looking at this what they want you to pay attention to. So here's NCC Group. I alluded to them earlier, not by name, when I said some people don't like screenshots. If you look at the reports from NCC Group that exist in Julio's repository, you'll find they don't use screenshots. And I didn't like that at first. I thought, no, this is wrong. They should use screenshots because I'm right. Screenshots are the best way of doing it. But then I read their reports closer, and I saw that they do a fantastic job of explaining things, even without using screenshots. I don't know why they don't use screenshots, but if you're going to not use screenshots, this is the way to do it. And here you see they have text as well. Text, it's not a separate thing now. It's kind of interspersed among the prose, the other text that's around it. It's nice and clear and clean. So if you want to see why I'm wrong and why you don't always need screenshots, look at an NCC Group report and see what you think. Make your own decision. What else is good about reporting? Teaching is good. So you can help the readers follow in your footsteps, or at least near them. Close to them counts. They don't have to do everything exactly how you did it. One thing I see sometimes is, I alluded to this earlier as well, long command lines. They can be disorienting. Maybe that's what you actually used in the report. Maybe you ran Nmap, or you ran a particular tool, and then you processed all the output to get only what you were interested in. That's great, but it can be difficult to follow. It's easier if you just have the Nmap command, for example. It's easy to see what you ran for Nmap. If you have it inside a loop and then you're dealing with output files and you're grepping for things and you're transforming the output, now the reader is going to go, oh, look at that cool command line. I wonder what the tester's doing there. I wonder what they know that I don't know. I love command lines. What's this all about? And now they've forgotten to pay attention to the actual point of the report, which is what the results were from running Nmap. So there's always a balance there. Just think about it. Just think about it. So you have an opportunity to teach your readers whenever they're looking at your reports, whenever you're writing your report. The technical folks, how do you find these problems? How did you find them? How might they find similar problems in other places? You're never going to find every problem. You're never going to find every instance of every problem. So you may have found 3 cases, and maybe there's 4 more somewhere else. Show them how you found it so they can do the same thing. And then also, once they fix it, once they've come up with what they're going to do to fix it, they can make that fix, follow your steps again, and see if the problem's actually fixed or not. You make them more self-sufficient, you make them better, you make the whole thing better by making it easier to follow. Keep in mind the context that you bring to your tests and the context that your customers have. Your customers, whether another company or another department inside your organization, you're looking at it from a different perspective. There's always some gap between how you see it and how they see it. Just remember that and try to write to bridge that gap a little bit. As you're doing that, don't be misled. Don't think that you're smarter than them because you know how to use this tool and you know how these systems actually work. You just know different things. They're smart. The people reading your report are smart, just as smart as you, maybe even smarter. If you're going to make a mistake about this, if you're going to be wrong about the intelligence of your readers, assume they're smarter than they actually are. It's a much better mistake to make than the other way around. So tell them enough to fill in that gap. If they're not used to using the tools that you use, because they're probably not, because they're not pen testers, describe the tool. Why did you run this particular tool? What is that good for? Why is this the one you chose? What is it going to show you? And then show how the tool ran. So they have some context for it. Oh, you're looking for file shares that have weak permissions. Okay. Oh, and there's a tool, Snaffler. Snaffler's a tool that will, okay, that's interesting. I never heard of Snaffler before, right? Who has heard of Snaffler that's not a pen tester? It's a great tool. Give them some explanation why they should care about it, what it should look like. So you have those two audiences. You have the technical folks and you have the business folks. Anticipate their questions. If you think about those, especially you have someone in your life that can be a stand-in for both of these audiences. You might have a software developer friend who's really quick and really smart and does great things developing new programs. Think about that person when you're talking about technical things. Maybe it's somebody who's just a fantastic system administrator who can solve problems and roll things out across large environments quickly without problems. Think about that person, write for that person. On the business side, think of somebody who's not into computers, somebody from your church, somebody from a club, one of the other parents on the kids' soccer team. How would you describe it to them? If they don't know, this is the person who doesn't know what version of Windows they're running and doesn't care. This is the person who doesn't want to use the computer because it's fun, but because they have other priorities and the computer helps them get to those things. You know somebody like that. Think of someone like that when you're writing for that particular audience. Anticipate what they're going to ask and make it so they don't have to ask. The last line on this slide is probably the most important thing for writing. Whenever you write down something, read it out loud to yourself. If you're writing down a description of a problem, or if you're writing down the steps that should be taken to fix that problem, read it out loud to yourself. You can mutter if you want. It doesn't have to be in a huge speaking voice, but read it out loud. Make yourself hear what it sounds like. If it sounds awkward, it is awkward, and you should rephrase it. There's a great tendency to try to overcomplicate things, to try to use big words when small words are available, to try to overgeneralize sometimes. And you'll catch that if you listen. If you listen to your own words, and you're always there, so you can read them to yourself. You don't have to ask somebody else to do it. You'll develop a sense for what works and what doesn't. Trust yourself. You've been talking your whole life. You know this stuff. So teaching is good. Here's a little section from our actual report template. When we're doing reconnaissance, one of the things we look for is we look for metadata in like Office files that are on somebody's website. So PDFs, Word documents, whatever. And we've got a tool we use called Power Meta that Bo Bullock, one of our testers, wrote that automates this for us. So we have an introduction here. We say we're looking for metadata on publicly exposed files. We're saying, why do we care about this? We're saying, what did we use to do that? And that little 3 there is a footnote. There's a footnote that is a link to the repo where that thing exists, where anybody can download it. And then we show them the commands that we ran. This is it. Anybody who at least knows how to open up a PowerShell prompt can run this command and get the same results that you got. This is what I mean by teaching. This is it. We're assuming that you don't know what Power Meta is. We're assuming maybe you don't know what metadata is or why it's something to be concerned about. And we're explaining it to you like you're an adult and you can process information. Automation is good. Automation is one of my greatest conflicts. I'm so conflicted about automation, especially in this area, because you have to do it. You can't do it all by hand. There's not enough time to cover everything you need to if you don't automate things. But if you automate too much, you end up with documents that are too broad. They cover too many possibilities. They're not tailored to the environment that you're working in. And this is part of my part of why I haven't yet found a reporting framework that I like, because everyone that I've seen does too much automation. They do too much boilerplate text. There's too much. It might be like this, or it might be like that. Or we found systems in the environment that might have had these properties and might have had those properties. You got to pay attention to how much you're automating things. So here are things that do not work when you're doing reporting or when you're trying to automate things. If you just take a folder on your disk and you just put screenshots in while you're testing, and later on, you're going to pick the good screenshots and you're going to describe what you found in the report later. That does not work. You won't remember. You won't have all the screenshots you need. They won't be clearly showing the problems you found. And what if you need help? What if you have to leave town for some reason and you can't finish the test? How is someone going to come in after you and finish? Another thing that doesn't work is just screenshots just in the report. Instead of putting them in on a folder on your disk, just put them in the report, right? Then you can take the time to make sure that they're arranged right. The composition is good. We got our boxes and arrows and all that kind of stuff. And we'll add the words in later to describe what we were doing because I want to stay focused on the test. I understand where you're coming from. You want to stay focused on the test. But for the same reason, this doesn't work. You're not going to be able to go back and recreate a true story of what you did. You'll make things up. Oh, I had the screenshot. I must have been doing this. By the time you finish the test, if it's 5 days or 10 days or 15 days down the road, you will forget what you had done on the first day. Another one that doesn't work is people ask me a lot, well, what do you use to take notes during your test? What application do you use for that? I don't take notes during my test. I write the report during my test because otherwise I have to write it twice. I have to write my notes and then I have to go summarize my notes in a report. And that's painful. I, like every other tester I know, I want to spend as much time as I can testing. So if I have 40 hours for the test, Monday through Friday at 3:00, I'm going to say, all right, I think I'm done. It's time to finish up the report. I'm not going to have time. I'm not going to leave myself enough time to rewrite everything. And it's not the best use of time either to write it twice, right? Another thing that doesn't work is a report template where it's just fill in the blanks. You try to cover every possible outcome, every possible test that you're going to run. And every time you do the test, you run the same commands in the same order. And based on the output of those commands, you take this branch or that branch. Some of that is fantastic. Some of that will save you a ton of time. What I showed you on the previous slide will save you a ton of time. But too much of it, and you end up with this boilerplate stuff that's hard to read. It is better to have less of that, not enough of that, than to have too much, because too much is very obvious very quickly that you're not paying attention. You're just checking the boxes. You're just trying to fill in the blanks. And that's obvious in the report. And it doesn't show a lot of care. You might have taken a lot of care. You might have done a wonderful job, but if that's what your report looks like, your customer's not going to see that. And then these kinds of things, you see these a lot in boilerplates. These phrases I call may contain one or more of the following type things. You see that on ingredients on packages sometimes. So there were systems that had support for NBNS, LLMNR, and or other legacy protocol. Well, that's fine for boilerplate, but by the time you're done testing, you know whether that's and or whether that's or. Say what you found. The in-scope domain name or names. Was it one or was it more than one? I mean, just get rid of the parentheses if it's multiple. It looks careless. It looks like you did not take the care to notice what you were testing while you were testing it and explain it to the people who were trying to read it. May contain one or more of the following comes from this, and ingredients on things like pretzels. May contain one or more of the following, these different kinds of oils. And you get why they do this, right? For pretzels, because maybe any one of those three oils would work. And maybe based on supply chain or expenses or whose brother's got a canola farm, they're going to use one of those types of oils and another type a different time. You don't have to reprint the label. So this works for them. And what they're saying is, we don't know for sure. It could be any of these three things. If you were analyzing those pretzels, you would want to know, right? If someone hired you to analyze these pretzels, they wouldn't want to hear, oh, there's some kind of oil in there. They would want you to figure out what it is. So as you go, ask yourself these kinds of fundamental questions. Have I clearly shown what's important? What do I think is important? It's your job to know what's important. What do you think is important? Have you clearly shown that? Are you presenting the facts so clearly that it's hard to misunderstand? Not just easy to understand, hard to misunderstand. When you have an opinion, are you presenting it clearly as your opinion? Or if it's someone else's opinion you're borrowing, are you saying that? Another phrase I see in reports that drives me up a wall is, it is recommended to, what is it is recommended? Who is recommending? Are you recommending it? If you're recommending it, stand up and say, it is my opinion that this is what should happen. Or my company, BHIS recommends that this change be made. Or Microsoft recommends that you disable this old protocol. Say who it's coming from. It is recommended. Don't ever say that. Are you including enough for a reader to intelligently disagree? So you're not writing a persuasive report here. You're not trying to say, this is my position, let me convince you of it. You're trying to give them enough information and enough of your opinion that's important so they can understand the situation. You're not trying to say, every problem I found in here, you must fix. That's not your job. Your job is to say, here are the problems I found. Here's why I'm concerned about those problems. And let them take it from there. Let them say, okay, I understand what you're saying. You're saying that we have SMB version 1 enabled, and you're saying that SMB version 1 is bad. It's got security problems. There are newer versions that are way better than that. SMB version 1 isn't needed anymore. It's been withdrawn from current version to Windows for a long time, so we should get rid of it. That's what you're saying? Yes. If you get that far, you're done. Now they might say, well, we have an old legacy system that doesn't support a newer version, so we have to use SMB version 1. They might not tell you that. It's not their job to tell you that. They don't have to satisfy you about this. But let them do that. Give them enough information so that they can take the rest of the stuff that you don't know and apply that to the facts that you did find and make an intelligent decision. So do your words and images support that informed decision-making? Does your writing show respect for your readers? This is where I pull out the word just. If you ever find yourself using the word just to explain how a problem should be solved, stop and take a breath and find a different way of saying it. If something is so simple that you say, well, if you would just change your password policy, if you would just upgrade your old Windows XP box to something more currently supported, if it's that simple and you're finding it, I promise you there's a reason that they haven't done what is the obvious thing to do. And when you say, if you just do this, you're minimizing all the things you don't know. Why is it the way it is? You're saying, hey, you didn't know this was here? You know how you solve Windows XP problems is you don't use Windows XP anymore, right? Who doesn't know that? They know that. Explain why. Don't say just, or don't say simply. If a simple change to the password policy would make this go away, or these systems can be quickly upgraded. No, if they could have been quickly upgraded, they would have done it before you came, right? So that's what I mean by respect for your readers, that accept that they know things you don't know. And when you find something that you think is just crazy and egregious, don't say this is crazy and egregious. Say this is true. This is true. This is true. Here's my concern about that. Here's what you should do to fix that. And then let them decide if it's important or not. And this leads to, have you assumed too much about your readers or the world? Are you assuming that they don't know what they're up to, that they don't know that they had this old system, that they don't know or they haven't come across this before? Think about what your assumptions are. You're always making assumptions. You can't get away from it. Understand, have an idea what you're assuming, and make sure that that's an appropriate assumption. And if you're going to be wrong on the side of kindness, be wrong on the side of, hey, you probably knew this, but I want to call it out for you. So how do you do all that? I got some tips. Now, it takes some practice, but everything takes some practice, right? Everything worth doing takes some practice.